I think if you got the drive, if you got the ability to take a setback without taking it personal, you push past it and you go on to the next thing. If you knock on enough doors, someone's going to let you in.
How many people go through life doing work they really don't like, but every day dreaming of, say, working in the aviation industry? They say it's too late. They think it would be too hard. They think it would go against conventional norms. If you never go after what you want, you'll never have it. This is Fly the Transition. Join us as we soar through the captivating stories of individuals embracing a thrilling journey into the aviation industry. From pilots spreading their wings to mechanics fine-tuning the engines and a myriad of industry professionals, each with a unique tale to tell. Get ready to dive into the diverse backgrounds, the pivotal moments that propelled their leap, and the sheer determination that transformed their aspirations into reality. We're not just about dreams. We're about making them take flight. Welcome to Fly the Transition. And now your host, Jim Schilling.
Well, hello there, all my aviation friends. Welcome back to another thrilling episode of Fly the Transition. I am your host, Jim Schilling. Thank you so much for joining me as we embark on another adventure of career transformation. So what do we have in store for today's episode? I had the honor of sitting down with Herve, who is a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. He has found his passion in soaring through the skies in the world of agricultural aviation. So stick around and you'll get to hear all about his incredible journey in just a few minutes. But before we dive into Herve's story, let's take a quick pit stop at the mailbag. I'm a huge fan of getting feedback from all of you. It really helps to drive me and feeds my passion to keep sharing all these stories with you. So we'll talk about 2 Apple Podcast reviews that I got in the last couple weeks. The first is from user HMiller46, titled Icing on the Cake. They say, in the last year, I've become a podcast listener. In that time, Fly the Transition has become the perfect podcast to accompany the Midlife Pilot podcast, Opposing Bases, and of course, the Fly Midwest podcast. Plenty of new and intriguing content help my commute breeze by. Fly the Transition helps keep my dreams of transitioning into the aviation career field aloft. Well, H. Miller, thank you so much for that feedback, and I'm glad that you enjoy what we're putting out there, and best of luck to you as you chase your aviation dreams. Our next review is from bsin339. I'm pretty sure I know who you are, but I'm not going to call you out because you didn't put your full name in there. Just know that I know. At any rate, loving the podcast. As a recently certificated commercial pilot, I really appreciate the content you are providing. Looking forward to more episodes as I near my retirement from my corporate job and transition into getting paid for following my passion. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much for that review as well. I wish you nothing but the best in your midlife pilot journey into a career in aviation. See, I told you I knew. Thank you once again for that great feedback. Your support helps keep this podcast flying high, and I'm always eager to extend the conversation beyond just this podcast. So don't forget about our great community back in the Discord. Those who aren't familiar, it's a forum-type social media platform where we can discuss the episodes after we play them. A couple of episodes ago, we actually had Layla, who was our guest, who's also a member of the community, and there was some fun conversation that happened back and forth after that, and people were able to talk directly to Layla. One of those is Ted from the Midlife Pilot podcast, who had said, loved how the setbacks was what made you realize how much you loved flying. They were able to engage and have a little bit more back and forth after that, but it's a great community. It doesn't cost you a thing, and we'd love to have you aboard. So if you're interested in joining the Discord, you can send me an email, flythetransition@gmail.com, and I will personally send you an invite to our Discord community. All right, so let's jump into this week's interview. Last week, I talked about how I was going to delay this interview because I wanted to take a little bit more time to edit it and get it just right, and I hope that it will be worth the wait. Herve's journey is a testament to resiliency, adaptability, and unwavering determination, qualities that he honed during his time in the United States military. So join me as we explore his path from United States Marine to the vast skies of aviation. We'll delve into the challenges that he faced and the triumphs that propelled him into the world of agricultural flying. Herve, welcome to the Fly the Transition podcast. Really glad to have you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
We're going to talk a bit about your journey from the military, some contract work it looks like, and then into aviation tonight.
Yes, sir.
So I think that we'll start off the same way I ask most people. What's your background with aviation?
Well, my dad was a pilot and a mechanic, an A&P mechanic.
Okay.
My dad came here from France in the 70s. My uncle, who remained in France, he was a mechanic for Lufthansa until he retired. And afterwards, did a lot of, maintenance on private airplanes. He owned a de Havilland Chipmunk and a Tiger Moth for a while. So this is kind of a family thing for us.
Okay. Pretty early exposure, it sounds like. Did you get up in the air at all with them, or?
Oh, every chance I could.
Okay.
Dad was very, very good about taking me flying with him, and it just seemed like about every weekend I'd spend at the airport with Dad. And in the summer, I'd spend a little bit more time there when I wasn't in school, But yeah, Dad used to put the car seat in a Cherokee or a 172 or whatever was on the ramp, and we'd go bomb around for an hour or so. And I guess you say I was kind of born with it, and then kind of walked away and came back.
So as you're growing up and being exposed to aviation, did you think of aviation as a career, or was it just something you guys did as a family or something else?
I had thought about it, honestly. Getting into high school in the mid-'90s, and I'm kind of looking at the environment, you know what I mean, as far as pilot jobs, what's out there. And there were a lot of cats with thousands of hours, flying checks in Navajos at night, hoping to get a jet job.
Yeah.
And it looked kind of bleak, you know what I mean? And it's not that I was turned off from it. It's just that I didn't really see where I would be able to come in with a wet commercial and be able to compete with guys like that, who a lot of whom were military trained. You still had a lot of Vietnam guys who were in those jobs.
Okay.
I kind of looked at that and thought, this would be a lot of fun, but I just really don't know that I'd be able to compete in that environment.
Okay. So as you're thinking about that, though, are you looking more towards like the airline side of things, or were you aware of other avenues within aviation?
Everybody knows, but the airlines is that's the high visibility career field in aviation.
Yeah.
I knew a lot of guys that did charter work. My dad, when he wasn't mechanicking, did some 135 flying in King Air, some medical flights, things like that.
Okay.
So I was aware of it, but again, a lot of those jobs were held by people with a lot more experience than I had. I guess I kind of gave up on having an aviation career fresh out of high school.
Okay. So that begs the question, what did you do fresh out of high school?
Oh, well, 2 weeks after I got a diploma in my grubby little hands, I got on a bus and went to Parris Island, South Carolina for a 12-week vacation.
I think we define vacations differently, sir.
Well, physically, yeah, I mean, it's strenuous, but, Marine boot camp, if you think about it from a mental perspective, if you can go into it thinking that for the next 3 months, I don't have to make a single decision.
Okay.
Everything I'm going to do is scripted. I mean, that training schedule is already out there. You know what you're going to wear. You don't have to worry about a haircut.
Yeah.
I mean, everything's taken care of. Yeah, it is physically demanding. And there are some things that are mentally challenging. I don't want to say like it's just, mindless, robotics or anything like that. But a lot of the day-to-day stuff you really don't have to worry about,
Sure. Interesting perspective on it. You go into the Marine Corps. So what MOS did you have in the Marine Corps?
I started off, I was an 0311, a rifleman.
Okay.
How I ended up in the Marines, I was in the high school Air Force Junior ROTC at my high school back in Alabama. And I was kind of leaning. I thought, enlisting in the Air Force would be pretty cool. And one day I had a high school job. I was working at J.C. Penney's of all places. And this dude comes walking in. He's got, the khaki shirt and these blue pants and a chest full of ribbons. I thought anybody who's tough enough to walk into a mall in Birmingham, Alabama, dressed like that has got to be one tough cookie.
Yeah.
And so we started chatting, and all the other recruiters have been calling. You're at that point in high school, junior, senior year.
Right.
They're all, and all the other recruiters were offering things, like the Army and the Navy were talking about what they would give me. And so I see this Marine. I was like, what do you give me to sign up? And he said, I'm not going to give you, well, I can't say the word he said. But he said, I'm not going to give you anything. He says, I'll let you have the chance to prove that you're worthy to be a Marine. And, it's one of those things that, in retrospect, like, that's a really easy mark to get a teenage boy with who's kind of a type A personality.
Yeah.
But, when he phrased it like that, it's like, so they threw the gauntlet. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you not take the challenge? Yeah, next day I showed up at his office. We did some paperwork and started that ball rolling.
That is awesome. So it's late 90s that you're going into the Marine Corps, and then you go to infantry school. What does your day-to-day look like as a rifleman in the Marine Corps at that point?
Oh, well, School of Infantry at the time, I mean, that's a 4-week thing, and it's kind of one of those things where everything you learn is just kind of, it's just to teach you how to deal with being wet and cold and miserable. You know what I mean? All the tactics stuff you're going to learn once you get to your unit in the fleet, because everybody does things a little bit differently, and they have you your whole life. Infantry school for us is just like a lot of humping with a ruck on your back, like I said, crawling around the mud, being wet, being hungry, and being thirsty. And, it's what we tell people, where I say a lot of times, I've never had to practice being miserable. I'll seek comfort when I can, because anybody can be miserable for a period of time, but it does kind of get your body used to thinking, this isn't the end of the world. You can handle this. You'll push through it. You'll be fine.
Yeah. So once you get out into the fleet then, in your active duty assignment, what does your day-to-day look like there?
Okay, now we have a little bit more stability. You when you first check into your first unit as a new join, the words they use for us again are words I can't use on a podcast. But and this is a family-friendly show. We want more kids in aviation. You know what I mean? And my days would start somewhere around anywhere between 4 and 5:30 in the morning. Wake up, shower, shave, get ready for the day. Fall out, go into the quad. We had quad, and the barracks are built around a quad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we'd fall out into the quad, and we'd start our PT, probably run and do calisthenics and such for an hour or two. Then shower, get some breakfast. If we were in garrison, or what we call being in the rear, those days were filled with things like weapons maintenance, professional education, studying things, as far as various books on infantry tactics, what have you. People would give classes on all these aspects of infantry warfare. Then you'd break for lunch for a couple hours, come back, do it again in the afternoon, and sometime whenever the higher-ups were ready to go home, they'd have another formation tell you were free to go until the next morning. And then, honestly, you had people who would go to the gym as soon as they got out of work, and you had some others, I'm not going to say which group I fell into, who were more of the party animal types, who like to work hard, play hard, I don't know how much playing hard you could do in Jacksonville, North Carolina, but I sure tried to find out. But yeah, it's for a young single guy, it's actually a pretty good lifestyle. Weeks where you go to the field, going to the field could mean anything. It could be a live fire deal. It could be you could go out to the field for a week and just spend the whole time patrolling in the bush. There's a lot of fluidity. It's really hard to say what an average day for an infantryman is. It's not like the guys that one of my friends that were like administrative guys or personnel clerks. Their day is going to look the same pretty much all the time, right?
Yep.
And sometimes you have a little bit of envy to that. No, I really liked it. I think the unpredictability of it was what really made me enjoy it, because there was always something different.
Okay. I want to fast forward a little bit in your service.
Sure.
Just based on the time frame that you were in, I feel like this is probably a relevant topic. September 11th changed everything for the country, right?
Boy, tell me about it.
And truth be told, I was in the military over 9/11 as well. Granted, I was in the chair force and didn't go anywhere, but...
so you were the smart one.
Apparently, yeah. How did that change things for you after September 11th?
Well, honestly, I had just re-enlisted a few months prior to that. I had been sitting in Okinawa, Japan, and I really didn't have a solid plan of what I was going to do when I got out.
Okay.
I had a little bit of money squared away, but I didn't have any idea what I was going to do. And so one day I'm sitting in Okinawa, I'm having some drinks with a friend of mine, and I thought, this really isn't a bad life at all. This is, as it was in peacetime, you'd have a workup, you do what we would call a med float if you're on the East Coast. You get on the ships with the Navy, you go sail around the Mediterranean for 6 months, come back, and then your next deployment cycle is usually a 6-month deployment to Okinawa or something like that. It was a very predictable schedule insofar as an infantryman's life is predictable. And so again, I thought, this is a pretty good life. I'll go ahead and give it another shot, and maybe I'll make a career out of this. Maybe this is my place. And so I re-enlisted in February of 2001. And the unit I was in on September 11th back in North Carolina, it was a platoon-sized unit, and we'd have a team that was always on an alert status. And inside that alert status, there was different levels of the alert, you know what I'm saying? And this is back before everybody had cell phones. Cell phones were still pretty, bougie back in 2001.
Yep.
This particular level I was slated to start on September 11th was one of these things where, if I was going to leave the barracks, I had to, go to the duty NCO and let them know where I was going on base. Hey, I'm going to Subway. Here's a number, that kind of nonsense. Yeah. And so that was going to go on for a week. And I thought, well, man, before I, get locked down for a week, I'm going to have one good last night of partying, So that next morning, as I'm assuming the alert status, and I'm feeling really good, let me tell you. I'm out there in the sun, beating down on you. All of a sudden, our platoon sergeant comes running out, and he says, "Hey, man, some idiot in an airliner some idiot in an airplane just ran into the World Trade Center." And I thought, "Oh man, that's terrible. That's crazy." And so we go back, and you're in the Air Force. How inventory kind of rules everything, Mm-hmm. So the offgoing team leader and I were checking our notes against our gear sets and all. And then he comes out a couple minutes later and says, "Hey, a second one just hit the other World Trade Center." So then that mindset shifted from, oh, just somebody had a bad day, right? To, okay, this coincidences don't exist.
Yeah.
And so that was one of those, it was one of those moments. I guess like when my mom tells me, like, she remembers where she was when JFK was shot. I think everybody in our age group remembers precisely what we were doing.
Right.
Because, that is a life-changing event. And, once that happened, I slept in the platoon shop for a couple of days, and we didn't go anywhere after that, though. Everybody just thought, the balloon just went up. We're fixing to go over any day now. And, you were there at the same time. Nothing really happened to start with.
Right. It took a while to build that stuff up.
Right. But it definitely shifted the mindset. I remember on September 11th, I saw a lot of the guys who were the biggest trash talkers about how they wanted to go get some. And all of a sudden, they're like, "Oh, man, career progression. I got to go to the drill field. I got to go get on recruiting duty." Something like that. And then you saw the other guys who were like, "Hey, this is finally a chance to earn our paycheck." So it was one of those things. It was really interesting study in human nature, knowing that sooner or later you're going to be involved, but kind of seeing what happens in the interim,
Yeah. I have a hard time thinking that over the course of the rest of your enlistment that you don't end up in some type of deployed situation as a rifleman in the Marine Corps.
Oh, no, they found work for us.
I bet they did.
My first deployment after September 11th, I didn't deploy until it was August of 2002. I boarded a ship. I boarded the USS Nassau, and we were going for a med float, but we all kind of knew it was a different kind of med float, And our first stop of all places, first place we went to was Kosovo.
Okay.
Like, okay, it's cool. It's, mountains, it's cold. Okay, this checks out. It's kind of fun. Those deployments were normally supposed to be 6-month floats. We got extended on station a couple of times. We actually got home 9 months to the day from when we left. And at the tail end of that deployment, right before they extended us the second time, they're not really telling us much on the ship, but all of us have access to emails to talk to our families back home. And, my mom is talking about everything that's on the news. And I'm like, this is starting to look serious. So, of course, you got all the OPSEC briefings, don't say this, don't say that. But I've got people back in the States emailing me, telling me where we're about to go.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, cool. And so we're about to head home, and we're like, man, there's, a whole bunch of Marines heading our way, and we're getting ready to go home. And, it kind of sucks we've been out so long, but it's going to suck more if the party kicks off and we miss it.
Sure.
Right as we're having that existential crisis, then we get the word, the ship turns around, we go through the Suez Canal. Now we know, okay, now it's live. And so now it's time to actually go and earn our paycheck. And, hey, it was cool for a little bit, Also, it kind of drives home, all this stuff that we've practiced and all this stuff that we've trained for, like now it's, if you make a mistake now, it isn't like your platoon sergeant, your platoon commander grabs you up and says, hey, you did this was the wrong thing. Now you and your entire team are dead. Now this is a for real, if I make a mistake, this is a consequence kind of thing. So, and that was the first of 3 times that I wound up in Iraq. I actually used to joke with one of my old first sergeants that if they kept sending me back there again, I was just going to open up like a Papa John's in downtown Fallujah. And, when they deployed over there, just give me a call and I'll deliver a pizza to them. We'll go live when they get there. But it was I was just like, I'm spending so much time in this country that I might as well just get citizenship,
Yeah. So what kind of missions were you taking part in when you were over there?
Mainly security patrols. My team was a ground sensor team. whole bunch of these little bitty boxes you put in the ground, and you had a seismic detector, and you could also have a magnetic detector and an infrared detector. So you could differentiate depending on how you deployed your sensors. You could differentiate if it was, say, one guy walking down a path or 10 guys or a platoon-sized group walking down a path. You could differentiate if they were, in vehicles or if they were not. The hairy part of that was just, putting the darn things in the ground and then getting them back out again without somebody spotting.
Sure.
Sneaking around is that comes pretty easy to an infantryman. That's what they pay you for. Second deployment, I went over as a machine gun section leader doing a lot of mounted patrols.
Okay.
In Humvees. And at the time, this is before the up armor Humvees were really a thing. And the IED threat had just started. So nobody was prepared for this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A buddy of mine found a Humvee. We found some armor plate. We welded plates to a Humvee. We welded a roof onto it that would support a gun turret, so I'd have some protection.
Sure.
And that was the name of the game back then. It was a whole new environment. And that's just the nature of warfare. You have a tactic comes out, now you have a counter to it, and now they develop a counter to the counter, and it kind of goes on and on. And deployment number 3, I went over again as a mounted section leader, 4 vehicle sections doing mounted patrols, mainly MSR security, so a main supply route.
Okay.
That third deployment that I went to Iraq, our AO was basically from the Tartar River, which is between Fallujah and Ramadi, to a couple of miles to the east of Camp Fallujah, looking for IED emplacements, trying to disrupt that enemy action of planting IEDs that were targeting the large supply convoys and things of that nature. Like I said, a lot of the same, deployment number 2 and 3 was in the same area. We were based in Ramadi on the second deployment, and we came over to Fallujah to participate in Operation Phantom Fury in November of 2004. And then deployment number 3 was from April 2006 to October 2006, and we were based in Fallujah for that one. It was one of those things, like, you look back and it sucked, don't get me wrong, but the camaraderie, the friendships you make, things like that are pretty huge. I'm still friends with a lot of those guys from that point in my life, and we're all a lot older and fatter, and
yep, that happens.
But now it's like I've got friends of mine that I went to combat with, and one of my friends I deployed with, his son just graduated from Paris Island last Friday.
Jeez.
Now
that doesn't make you feel old.
Not at all, But it's good to see him keeping it in the family, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Nothing bad to say about my time in the Marine Corps at all. I know there's a lot of people out there, and I'm sure there were in the Air Force, who were marking the days off the calendar until they got out,
Yep.
And don't get me wrong, there were times where I really wished I was anywhere but where I was. But at the same time, it was challenging. It was fun. Those were the good old days,
Sure. What prompted your decision to move a different direction? Was it an opportunity or?
Well, the Marine Corps wanted me to be a recruiter. And I did not want to be a recruiter at a time when you couldn't turn on the TV without hearing, 4 Marines killed in Ramadi, 3 soldiers killed in Baghdad. I thought it was going to be very hard for me to go to someone's house, some high school kid's house, and convince their parents to let me have their son or daughter for 4 years. And, odds are they're going to be all right, but here's what could happen. It seemed like I could think of easier ways to ruin my career. And also, my first wife and I, we had just bought a house like months before, because I had just received orders that was going to keep me on Lejeune for another 3 years. I thought, this is the time to buy a house. And they wanted me to go on recruiting duty, and I figured that was going to, like I said, that was going to be the kiss of death of my career, so I might as well just end it on my terms. And I said, I'm just going to pull the plug. When this enlistment's up, we'll get out, and I'll figure out what I'm going to do at that point.
So what direction did you go when you got out of the Marine Corps then? So
I started flying again during my second enlistment. There was a FBO at the local airport in Jacksonville, North Carolina. I got back. I got current again. I started flying. I started training for my commercial. And so I thought, this is pretty cool. And I thought, what can I do in aviation? Maybe this is something I could get into, when I retired. Because at that point, I still thought I was going to go for the full 20.
Oh, sure.
I gave a lot of classes in the Marine Corps. I thought, you know what, I can teach. I'm good at teaching. if you can teach tactics, you can teach flying. So I got my advanced ground instructor certificate and started doing a little ground school on nights and weekends. Kind of working with some of the flight instructors there, because those guys were working pretty hard, and it was easier for them to send a guy to me to do some ground stuff because they just had students booked consecutively. And maybe this way they could get more for lunch than a stale cup of coffee and a pack of nabs from the vending machine. And I could get my feet into, I could have more of a exposure to aviation doing that. And I really learned a lot from just teaching ground schools. The things that were tough on me when I was learning how to fly, like weather theory. These things were kind of hard for me to grasp. Teaching it kind of made it a little easier. So I thought, okay, well, maybe aviation's the way to go, as I'm getting out. So I got out of the Marines, and a friend of mine was working with a company that was contracted under SAIC, the counter IED education at 29 Palms, California, and Camp Lejeune and Camp Pendleton. And they were teaching Marines how to survive in that IED threat environment. And, he was a friend of mine. We hung out. The corporate headquarters was at Camp Lejeune. So he was there. I was there. When I got out, I didn't leave. You know what I mean? I had a house. Where was I going to go?
Yeah, right.
And so we'd sit around, drink beer. Eventually, he got me an interview with the guy who ran the team at 29 Palms. And they hired me to go teach, the counter IED piece with them at 29 Palms. And that was my first real civilian job when I got out, was working as a counter IED instructor.
So it looks like you're able to take those skills that you've gained probably through the Marine Corps and with your advanced ground instructor, and now you've got a career teaching Marines about some real threats to their life. Yeah,
it was a very interesting job. It was a very one of those things that you tell yourselves is, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort, but these guys are going down range. They deserve everything you can give them.
Oh, absolutely.
So, I mean, it was another one of those jobs where even when the work was hard, it was enjoyable hard work.
We'll get back to this week's episode in just a moment, but before that, a quick word from those who make the Fly the Transition podcasts possible. Aviation friends, are you looking for eyewear that's as adventurous as you are? Look no further than Flying Eyes Optics. Their ultralight, comfortable, and durable glasses and sunglasses are perfect for pilots. They are designed by pilots, for pilots, and for my money, they're the best aviation eyewear that I have ever had. If you or that special pilot in your life are interested in Flying Eyes, check out our affiliate link down in the show notes and use code FlyingMidwest10 and you can get 10% off your next purchase at Flying Eyes. Aviation enthusiasts, have you heard about my friends over at Pilot Quarters? This pilot-owned family business is crafting your next favorite flying shirt. Their chart-inspired merchandise comes in camp shirts, polo shirts, and more. And by popular demand, they're adding lightweight fleece hoodies and long-sleeve tees to their collection. So head on over to pilotquarters.com today and soar in style.
You're listening to Fly the Transition. If you've ever thought about changing careers and getting into the aviation industry, welcome to your new home. Now, back to your host, Jim Schilling.
So at some point, you decided to pursue a career in aviation.
Yes.
Tell me about that journey for you.
As fun as that job was in California, I really started getting burned out. It's really hard to describe to people who don't, who've not been in that environment. But when you started seeing people, come back and they're thanking you for all the things, because they'd come back from deployment, they'd see you at the PX or, the commissary getting a sandwich or something. Hey, hey, thanks, man, for everything you taught us. And that's cool. And it was hard for me. I thought it would be really easy if I wasn't going to be on the field, at least I could be on the sidelines, right?
Yeah.
And nobody really told me that was going to be the hardest on me, because here are these guys going down range, and I'm thinking, man, I've got all this knowledge. I'd love to come with you. I could probably do a lot better job for you if I was, in the fight with you, but that's not my position anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that really started to weigh on me. It really started to affect some of my my outlook on life. I was, really cranky. I was, this is just kind of, it was taxing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I had a buddy of mine who was, he was an ag pilot down in Texas, in Lubbock, Texas. And, he was basically telling me, he's like, and he had been a Marine, so he knew where I was coming from. And he said, look, man, he goes, you got to get out of this. He goes, this is going to eat you alive. He's like, you got to find something else to do. And so what else am I going to do, And so we kind of played that game. And he said, have you ever thought about getting into ag flying? And I thought, well, not really. I mean, I was aware that it existed, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I grew up in the South. I mean, they're not as prevalent there as they are, where I live now in the Midwest, but they're there. But everything you'd heard about those guys as I was growing up, in the aviation community is like, it's like the mafia, right? Like you can't get in unless you're born into it. Like one of those things. So I told him, honestly, I was like, I never really thought about it, And so at this time I'm looking at things I can do. I'd looked at going to ATP to finish my commercial and then get like all the rest of the certificates and then wind up again being the guy with the epaulets and the white shirt and the hat,
Mm-hmm.
When I left the job in California, I stopped in Lubbock to see him, and he took me to see his boss and some of the old timers that he flew with. And right about then, I decided, I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be in aviation rather than being at the airlines.
Sure.
And nothing against the airline guys. I have lots of friends that are doing it, and I think the world of them. It doesn't really seem to fit who I am as a person. One, I don't want to shave my beard off. I mean, I shave every day for 11 years,
Yeah.
But pilots are usually pretty type A, but like some of these guys are just larger than life personalities. And I thought, I'd love to, I want to be him when I grow up, kind of thing. And so that's what started the ball rolling for me to try to fight my way into ag, because I wasn't born into it. I don't have a dad whose name is on who's on the flying service door, So
right. So what does that process look like when you decide that, ag flying is the way for you? Like, how do you bust into that then?
As luck would have it, because I'm telling my friend of mine in Texas, I'm like, I don't know how to do this. Like, I don't know anybody in this other than you. And, you guys aren't hiring somebody with no time who, at this point, like I said, I only had a private certificate, maybe 500 hours to my name.
Okay.
I'm a long way from being where I need to be. And so he's like, look, he goes, don't go to ATP. Don't do that. Don't sign some contract. You're going to have to be out $80,000 to get to your MEI or whatever. I was like, okay, well, great. What do you want me to do? And so he's like, look, there's this school. At the time, it was in Rayville, Louisiana. It's just east of Monroe. And it was called Flying Tigers. The guy who started it was a huge LSU guy. He had gone to LSU, so everything was about the Tigers. He flew, so it was Flying Tigers. I talked to them, and I said, here's who I am. This is what I want to do. Here's where I'm at, and here's where I want to be. And they basically said, hey, come on down. We'll get you there. So I packed all my stuff up from California. I dropped my trash there in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and took what I was going to need and drove up to Rayville and started my path to being an ag pilot. Or so I thought.
Oh, there's a story to that I'm going to ask you in there.
Well, it's never, nothing is ever as easy as you see. And I'm not completely new to aviation. I didn't come into this thinking I'm going to go spend a month or two at this school and then people are going to be begging me to come fly their airplanes. Like, I knew there was going to be a little bit more to it.
Yeah.
I go there. The first thing I do within like a day, I took my commercial written, nailed that, and then scheduled my commercial check ride. So like, I don't know, 72 hours after I show up, I went and got my commercial done. Hey, awesome. Now I'm ready to go get paid to fly airplanes. This is great. So I got my commercial and I started their ag program, which at the time they had a couple of Citabrias with the same kind of GPS systems that we would have in our working spray planes, kind of bolted out into the cowling.
Okay.
So you could learn how to do like the turns you're going to do in the airplane, learn how to follow the GPS guidance. Because that's how we do it. We don't have flaggers in the fields anymore. Your fault when I'm flying now, when I'm working, I'm that light bar is telling me exactly where I'm putting, where I'm going to fly the airplane. They had a Piper Pawnee and a Cessna 188 on the ramp, and then they had a two-place Grumman Ag Cat. Part of the course was you got 5 hours with a fellow named Bob McCurdy, who was a super experienced ag pilot, and you'd sit in the back seat, which was the original seat the airplane was built with.
Okay.
And you go flying around, and he'd sit and tell you what you were doing wrong or what you were doing right. And here you got a guy who's been doing this at the time. I think Bob had been flying for 40 years. Ooh. And so it was really cool to have that kind of perspective. And so I got that done. I'm like, okay, cool. And now I'm a full-up ag pilot. Now I should be able to go get a job, right? Well, problem with that, by this time, now we're into May, and so I'm still pretty low time.
Mm-hmm.
There's anybody who's looking for a pilot in May isn't looking for someone who needs to be told what to do.
Right.
If they're looking for a pilot that late in the game, they want somebody they can put to work like that day. So, okay, what do I do next? Well, with a commercial and no instrument rating, you're really kind of limited on what you can do. I'm already here at this school. Why not go get me an instrument rating? And, and I will tell anybody who just wants to do ag, if they think they don't need an instrument rating, I'm still going to pressure them to do that, because even just in my daily flying, I think the precision I learned from the instrument rating and then flying a lot of IFR has made me a better spray pilot. I think it's a valuable rating. Anybody listening, if you don't have an instrument rating, do it. Now I'm sitting here with commercial and instrument rating, about 600 hours. What kind of jobs are available for a guy with a fresh commercial and a fresh instrument and 500 hours? Not a whole lot.
Not a lot.
Yeah. I was getting turned down for jobs at dead drop zones. You know what I mean? Like, this is pretty serious. What can I do with such low time and no experience? And I thought, well, you know what? I am already here at a school. Who's teaching me these things? I already have a ground instructor certificate. Let's just bite the bullet and get the CFI. Now I've got a CFI. Now I can make some money, right? Now you're looking at places who are looking for listings of these things on Facebook at the time. I didn't really have the money because I'd spent a lot of money getting to where I was. I didn't have a lot of money to join things like climbto350.com. So I was doing a lot of word of mouth stuff trying to find work.
Yeah.
I said, what I'm going to do? I'm in North Louisiana. My mom's down there in Hattiesburg. I'm going to put everything I own in the Jeep. I'm going to go see my mom. I'm going to spend a weekend with my folks. And on Monday morning, I'm going to hop in my Jeep and I'm going to drive up the interstate until somebody gives me a job. That was my plan. You can have too good of a plan, right? I figure if I have a bad plan, it can't get any worse.
That's interesting logic. Did it pay off?
Actually, it did. As luck would have it, I got home midnight Friday. By the time I got home, I was too tired to do anything. So I went and saw my mama, figured I could sleep on the couch for a couple of days.
Sure.
And my hair was getting pretty shaggy at that point. I was still, at the point where I still like to look kind of neat and presentable. I said, I better go find me a haircut. I knew the guy who ran the FBO at the Hattiesburg Bobby Chain Airport. Shameless plug, KHBG. Go fly in, give them a shout. They're great people. The guy who at the time owned it was a fella who had been in the Mississippi National Guard for years. And I thought, if anybody knows where I can get a haircut in Hattiesburg, Mississippi on a Saturday morning, it's going to be Ronnie.
Yeah.
So I go to see Ronnie, and as luck would have it, Ronnie is sold out to his sons, Chip and Chris. And I'm asking Chip, where am I going to go for a haircut? And, we hadn't seen each other in about a year or so, and we're kind of doing the catch-up thing. And he goes, you're a CFI? I was like, yeah. He goes, man, look, we've been looking for one. And I thought, man, that's great. So now I got a job. I've got a place I can go to get me a haircut. I mean, things are really I don't have to get in my Jeep and drive up the interstate.
Right.
Man, things have really taken off. There was the guy who was already instructing. There was a fellow named John Pope. He had a 172, but he had a huge, student load, and he was flying a King Air on the side. He was looking for somebody to give him a hand. I was looking for somebody to, give me a shot.
Yeah.
And so the story starts to pick up a little steam, right? Now I can use that commercial certificate. Now I can use that CFI. Now I can actually start, teaching. Again, like as much as I was learning new things doing the ground instruction, I really started learning things from flying with people, from sitting in that right seat and watching them make the same mistakes every other student's made, that you've made, that I've made. Mm-hmm. And seeing it develop before they realize they're making the mistake. Man, this is great. This is awesome. It's a very exciting feeling. Then I have my first student that goes for a check ride and he passes it. Now I'm thinking, okay, now this is really cool. Now here is proof that I'm not completely, off my rocker. So yeah, that's how I kind of started building a little time. You start networking a little bit, because now you're hanging out at the airport all the time.
Oh yeah.
Hoping that somebody calls and you can snatch them up right there. As I'm there one day, one of the guys, that flew a King Air, a 350 out of there, was going to go do a maintenance check flight because he just hung a loader engine on it. And I'd never been in a King Air before. I thought it was really cool. My dad used to fly them.
Yeah.
And this guy just says, hey, I'm about to go just do a quick maintenance flight. You want to hop in the right seat? I mean, yeah, of course I do.
Yep.
And so you start to network that way, and your name starts getting put out there. And along this time, we buy we buy a decathlon because, well, I've got tailwheel time. There's not really a guy providing tailwheel instruction out here. And I need a lot more tailwheel time for insurance in order to go do what I want to do in aviation.
Yeah.
So here's where I can kill two birds with one stone. I can teach people how to fly tailwheel airplanes. I can get that, tailwheel experience. And again, get paid while doing it. So we bought the decathlon, started pumping out tailwheel students. I'm not going to say I'm, Chuck Yeager 2.0. I'm a pretty decent pilot. I'm competent,
Yeah.
Again, sitting in the back of an airplane where I don't have the same sight pictures I had in the front and trying to anticipate what a student's going to do to try to wreck my airplane,
Mm-hmm.
that teaches you a lot as well. I think that experience right there really kind of boosted my skills, and I like to tell my students and, anyone else who will listen, I like to push my boundaries by nudges rather than shoves, right? I like to kind of ease into things. If I'm not at a point where I'm comfortable with flying with a 10-knot direct crosswind in this airplane and, this runway, if I'm trying to expand that, I'm not going to find a day where it's, 90 degrees of runway at 20 gusting to 40.
Right.
You know what I mean? I would say, okay, hey, here's 15. Let's send it. Let's see how this works. And if I don't like it, we'll go around. I'll find somewhere else. Worst case scenario, I'll find a runway that's pointed more to the wind and we'll wait it out. These are a lot of things I was able to learn, again, just from teaching people how to do something.
So at some point, you finally get your shot to move into the ag business. How does that happen?
Well, a lot of it was me. I was just calling people. The National Agricultural Aviation Association is our industry's, lobbying group. It's our professional organization we belong to, kind of like, so every year they put out a membership directory of operators, pilots who are members who submit their names. Got a lot of people who, and I can't fault them for this, wanted nothing to do with starting a rookie. It's a huge thing for someone to put that much faith in someone they don't know and put them in an airplane and give them the sort of the ability to ruin their professional reputation if they do a bad job. As luck would have it, I saw a guy who was on Facebook talk about a job he wanted, but then he wanted to take a different job. So now I knew there was an operator who didn't have a pilot, so I called this guy out of the blue. He was in Bozeman, Montana. In the summer, what we call the corn run, he flies in northwest Iowa. I knew he was looking for a pilot. I give this guy a call. He doesn't know me from Adam. I don't know him. We kind of have a talk. He's like, well, he goes, I think I might be full up for this year. He goes, but you know what? I'll keep you in mind. And maybe if something pops up, I'll either tell somebody about you or maybe I'll get back in touch with you. So I was like, okay, that's really cool, Well, a couple of days later, he calls me back and he says, how soon can you get to Bozeman, Montana? I'm working as a CFI. I'm not making a whole heck of a lot of money, but I knew that, I could figure it out. Anything that was going to get me in the show. I got a ticket to Bozeman, Montana. I met this guy. I flew with another pilot that was going to give the blessing to the insurance company in a Super Cub. Kind of did some spray runs, did a couple of turns.
Sure.
He said that it was reasonably expected that I wouldn't kill myself, so he would say it was good enough. And so, we have this conversation, and Boyd says, all right. He goes, expect to meet me in Iowa in the middle of July. So now I had to go get a pesticide applicator's permit, and I should have done it before, but I didn't really know where I was going to go, and I didn't want to spend, $100 I didn't necessarily have to get a license in a state I might not work in.
Sure. So that's by state then?
Yeah, all our pesticide licenses are by state.
Okay.
One of the pieces of advice I got was to get licensed in Nebraska because they reciprocate with a lot of more states than some of the others.
Okay.
So I tested for Nebraska, and then now that I had that, I was able to take that and go to Iowa and apply for reciprocity. Okay. So now I was licensed in Iowa. Now I can go fly for Boyd, and now I could actually be, the ag pilot I thought I was. I say that because I get to Iowa, and now and I think I'm ready. I'm ready for the show. I think I've got this all figured out, and I'm just going to go out there and set the world on fire. And I held that thought right until the first time they hooked that loading hose up to my airplane. Then I realized how much I didn't know.
What does the season look like for that? Because obviously we're talking Northwest Iowa. I think we both know how many months of the year there's snow on the ground there. I guess the pace of the work, how long the season is, what a day would look like?
Where our season would run from about middle of July. We would usually run into September at that time because at the tail end of the season, we'd throw spreaders on the airplane to go seed cover crop before they, so it'd start to germinate before harvest.
Okay.
And so a typical day back then, the Pawnee was a little bit easier. Just had that little flat 6 engine. I could pull it out, get it started, oil temperatures up before you can shake a stick at it, and then go, load my airplane. We'd go and take that first load out of the day, and by the time we got done with our first load, so that's going to be about an hour for everybody out there as we're doing it. We come back from that first load, and Linda would have breakfast ready for us.
Okay.
And so we go into the camper there and kind of have a sit-down breakfast. So, then we go out there and keep running maps until dinner, and then, have a sit-down dinner, around noon or 1 o'clock, and, fly the rest of the day till we run out of, maps or run out of daylight, and then go have supper somewhere. And then wash, rinse, repeat, do it all again the next day. And that part of Iowa, there's a large population of, I think the denomination is called apostolics. And,
okay.
People working on Sunday really isn't their thing. And so I get it. And it's great because now you have a guaranteed day off in the season.
Sure.
Because I'm going to tell you that doesn't happen to me now. But yeah, back then it was really cool, right? And so that was pretty much our day. And your learning curve was pretty steep. So that first load I took out in that Pawnee on year 1 was a 40-acre rectangle. And it probably took me all of 40 minutes to go and spray that stupid thing. Just because I was so new at it. And oh man, this is, and then by the end of the summer, I'm whipping those things in, 20 minutes, because you're getting more comfortable with your airplane. You're getting more comfortable with maneuvering down low. You thought you were comfortable in school, but you really weren't, because now, again, just like those first deployments in the Marines, this isn't training. This is
right.
This is a real. So there's a parallel here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is your real life deal. That first year was great. Like I said, the boss and I meshed really well, and he asked me if I came back if I wanted to, fly as Ag-Cat. So here, going from a Pawnee with a 150-gallon hopper, and to be honest with you, even though it had a 260-horse engine, I put 120 gallons in it one day, and it flew enough to scare me. So, I was like, hey, getting a bigger airplane. Yeah, let's do it. Let's get in that Ag-Cat with the 300 gallons, and, let's go to work. For a lot of years of my career, I was an Ag-Cat guy. My quality of life flying for Boyd Morgan was, it was astounding. It was a short season. But for those 2 months of the year, I was a king. We'd go meet in Iowa. We'd set up the airport. We'd pull all the loading equipment where we needed it. We'd get the hotel room situation sorted out. And then my job was to fly an airplane 6 days a week. Well, let me take that back. My job is not to fly an airplane. The airplane is just the tool I use, the implement I use for my farm work.
That's a cool way to put it.
People trying to get into ag, they look at it like, oh man, the flying looks great. Yeah, I can't tell you about the flying. Nowadays in my air tractor, I'll spend 6 months flying an airplane without looking at the airspeed indicator once. I don't care what it says. It's you get to the point where the flying just has to happen. My job is to safely, accurately, and efficiently apply crop protection products to a specific location, to a specific crop. Some people in agriculture are driving John Deere's. I'm flying an air tractor. That's the difference.
Talk to me a bit about how you built your comfort for, and maybe describe a little bit the maneuvers that you have to do to safely and efficiently do these applications.
So many of the young pilots coming into the industry, they see you because they're driving down the highway. They see the yellow airplane or the white airplane, whatever it is. They see it cranked over in this vertical bank, just doing all this kind of really cool flying. They're going close to the ground, and it just looks really cool, right? One of those things you want to tell people, the turning hard is cool. Yeah, it looks great. It's a great air show thing. When I'm doing this for real, I've never had a field pack up and run away from me. If I pulled off my swath, that field's going to be right where I left it until I get that airplane turned around. So I don't concern myself with how my flying looks from the outside. I've known enough pilots who did care about what their flying looked like from the outside, and some of them are no longer with us.
Sure.
If it takes me 30 seconds to get turned around, it takes me 30 seconds. If it takes me 20 seconds, wonderful. Length of the turn isn't where I'm going to make up my time. I'm going to make up my time on the loading pad between loads. I'm not going to make it up trying to turn harder and turn faster. To go back to your original question, I tell people that Pawnee was the best flight instructor I ever had. I would come off of a pass. You'd feel the airplanes. It's getting lighter every pass, right? Because you're letting chemical go. And since that's changing your CG, you're constantly trimming the airplane as you're working.
Sure.
And it's just that subconscious kind of thing. And that's what, we're talking about. You start to pull, maybe you start tugging a little too hard on that Pawnee. And that Pawnee's a beautiful training airplane because if you start to tug just a little too hard, the stick kind of chatters in your hand a little bit. It's not violent. It's not, it doesn't snatch away from you and come unhooked on you when you're in the middle of a turn. It just says, hey, could you maybe back off a little bit?
Sure.
And then you just aim for consistency. And this number's going to change based on environmental conditions. Like if it's a hot day, if I've got a heavier load, or if it's a product that's heavier than normal, maybe when I pull off a swath, I might pull out and look for, 1,500 foot before I turn back around to make my next pass. But that number can change. Maybe it's a cooler day and the airplane's just really performing right. Maybe I'm looking for 1,300, but I don't know that until I start working that day.
Not only in that first couple seasons, but as you're changing airframes over the years, how long would you say it takes you, I guess personally, to start to feel proficient and comfortable with the aircraft as you're going about your business?
Oh boy, there's a moving target. Some airplanes just feel more natural. I think when I went from the Pawnee, it probably took me about, the whole season to really get comfortable with her. I felt like right about the time that the leaves started to turn on the soybeans, it was time to start thinking about going back to Mississippi. That's when I was really comfortable in that Pawnee. And then the next year when I got in the Ag-Cat, within the first week, I thought, okay, this is a pilot's airplane. I had not found any dark secrets in the Ag-Cat. Any of the jet guys listening are going to shake their heads at this one. But, for these straight wing GA airplanes, the best way to learn that airplane is to take it up to altitude and just stall the crap out of it in every configuration you can think of, right? As long as it's not placarded against it.
Yeah.
But go out there and learn that airplane. The first day I went back to Iowa on season number 2, I pulled the Ag-Cat out of the hangar, got it warmed up. I took it to 5,000 feet and I wrung the heck out of it. And then I thought, okay, now I know what the steps are, right? Once you got the handle of, learning that and finding the corners of that envelope, now the airplane became a lot more enjoyable. You can't just do this, these straight ahead, unaccelerated power off stalls. I mean, you've got to stall it like you're going to stall it when you're going to stall it. When you're going to run into trouble in an airplane is when you're heavy and when you're in that turn.
Yep.
And I would say that I'm not going to fly a loaded ag plane right into the brake. I'm going to fly it into the buffet and then let go and just recover there.
Yep.
But I want to know where it's at.
You talked about, as you go up for runs, you're grabbing maps, stuff like that. I'm assuming that's all digital at this point, right?
Yeah. And, here's a fun thing. As we talk about the progression, when I started in 2013, and I mean, granted, there's probably guys who might be listening who started well in advance of this. And, here I am. I'm in that cool age where to some people, I'm a know-nothing kid. And then to another group of people, I'm some gray-haired old fart who doesn't know anything because he's too old. It's a really fun place to be.
Yeah.
So, when I first started, most of our maps were satellite imagery maps with the field highlighted and, the township range and section numbers printed on it. And I carried a plat book for Lyon County, Iowa in the airplane with me. Not that I ever really looked at it, but in case I needed it.
Sure.
At some point, you just really don't need the map anymore, to tell you where you're going. I mean, it's an official document that you attach to your application report, so you do need the map. But, I know where, Joe Bob's field is. It's 3 miles south of the school. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I'm just going to fly to it. In my 802 now, I've got this thing where my wife can input a map on her computer and my GPS will connect to Wi-Fi and it will just download the job automatically. She can say, hey, I sent you job number so-and-so, and I can upload it into my GPS and pull it up. And we don't really use paper maps in our operation anymore because everything's on my iPad that's on, that's in my little radio box. Sure. And then I have my moving map on my GPS display. So the technology is really amazing that we've got to the point where I used to climb out of an airplane, man, with 2-inch stack of paper. Mm-hmm. And now I'm climbing out and I'm not really carrying anything. If I click the start and finish buttons on my iPad as I'm working, once I click finish, then all that weather data that I used to have to guess at, is just auto-filled.
So obviously it's a short season, relatively speaking. So what do you do over the rest of the year to fill your time?
So after that first year in Iowa, I went back to Mississippi and started doing more instructing. This is going to be a long, cold winter if I couldn't pay to keep my house heated, And so went right back into the grind of teaching, did some tailwheel stuff, did some, regular primary student stuff in the 172. 2016, when I went to take a longer season job working for a spray company in Walnut Ridge, Arkansas. And so now my season was a little bit more, it was closer to year round, say from April through October. So I didn't have as much time to pursue any of the other kind of flying. So yeah, now I'm flying a 500-gallon turbine Ag-Cat, flying rice in Arkansas, which is really demanding work because as you fertilize rice, which is a lot of what you're doing, it's a very fertilizer-intensive crop. Anything that if you have if you miss a piece of your swath, like if you get blown off your swath by a couple of foot, or you're flying your swaths too close together or too far apart, you'll have a phenomenon we call streaking.
Okay.
And it shows up quick, like within a couple of days. And no matter what you do, it's going to be there until they cut it. And so it's kind of like every field, we tell people, or I would tell people, like every field I do, I'm signing my name to it because anybody could fly by and, oh yeah, so-and-so did that field. He streaked the heck out of it, and sometimes, if the farmer sees it, hey, farmers fly airplanes too,
Yeah.
You don't want to get that reputation. So you become really, really focused on your accuracy.
What advice would you give to someone who's considering a change of careers into something related to aviation?
Going back to what I said about, the military, about the School of Infantry being just a course in teaching someone how to be cold and miserable and wet all the time and still functioning. As it pertains to agriculture, I think, the infantry thing was the best preparation I could have done, working around the clock to accomplish a mission. We're kind of in the same boat.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my days here, especially, at the operator level, are 16 hours from the time I get to the airplane till the time I'm driving home at night.
How bad?
And then I'm going to go back and do the whole thing tomorrow. Being able to deal with adversity, and because that's going to be anywhere in aviation, right? Yeah, that guy flying the Airbus probably doesn't have to go playing slalom around a bunch of wind turbines, but at the same time, I don't have to go taxi around O'Hare,
right?
And I don't have to fly to Teterboro. So the adversity is there on both ends. So I would say for anybody who wants to get into aviation is to say, look, man, just like I've talked about in my story to get where I am now, there's been quite a few hurdles to jump. Quite a few things that popped up in my path that were kind of unforeseen. And, in the Marine Corps, we called it Semper Gumby.
Yeah.
Just be flexible. If you really have your heart set on something, maybe it doesn't happen. And then maybe you can come back to it later. Like I said, I haven't written the final chapter of this story. I wanted to be a spray pilot, and I took quite a few detours to get here. So I think if you got the drive, if you got the ability to take a setback without taking it personal, you push past it and you go on to the next thing. If you knock on enough doors, someone's going to let you in.
Sure. Well, I really appreciate you sitting down with me and telling me about your journey into aviation. And I think that it's a unique perspective that you've got. You've got a great attitude, and you've gone into a different side of aviation that some people don't necessarily consider. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. I had a blast.
Really appreciate Herve coming on the Fly the Transition podcast, sharing his story with all of us, and hopefully that was inspiring to some of you out there who are looking at maybe a different side of aviation other than the traditional 135 or the airline route. One thing I will mention is that just for time considerations, I did have to cut this episode down a bit from our original interview. There is still a lot of great content between myself and Herve that I will be planning on sharing later on this week. It won't be terribly long, but it'll be just some bonus content about how he got to where he is right now in his agriculture flying journey. Okay, so looking ahead to next week, I will be taking a break from sharing aviation career transition stories to one that is going to cover a topic that is both near and dear to me, but also very important to those that are thinking of making a career change into aviation, and that is the all-important medical certificate. We will be joined by Dr. Keith Roxo of Wingman Med. He's going to talk to us all about the important things that you'll need to consider as you go for your medical, some misconceptions that are out there, and so much more. So I'm really excited to share that episode with you. Stay tuned for that next week. If you'd like to reach out, or if you'd like to be a guest on a future episode of Fly the Transition, you can reach me on any of my social medias. You can find those down in the show notes, or you can email me at flythetransition@gmail.com. And finally, if you are enjoying what I am doing on the podcast, let's get the word out to others. If you know someone who would benefit from the podcast, please share it with them. Share it on your social medias, good old-fashioned word of mouth. Or one of the easiest ways, take that device that you're listening to this podcast on right now, jump onto that platform, give me a like, rating, and review. I'll even read your reviews on future episodes of the podcast. So that will do it for this week's episode. Thank you once again for tuning in to Fly the Transition, and we will see you next time.
You've been listening to Fly the Transition. Life is too short for you not to do what you love. And our passion is to give you all the tools you need to make the transition from doing what you do to being in the aviation industry. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, you can reach out by email at flythetransition@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook at Fly the Transition. And the website for Flying Midwest Media is flyingmidwest.com. Keep soaring. See you next time on Fly the Transition.